Pressing apple cider is not the only demonstration here at historic Bowens Mills. In just a few moments, we'll see O.J. Sabin demonstrate corn grinding here at historic Bowens Mills, which was done a long time ago.
These are French Burr stones. They were brought in when the mill was built in 1864. There are 14 pieces to each one of these stones. And when I say French Burr stones, it's coral reef off the shores of France. What they would do is have men chip the blocks of coral reef off, bring them to the surface, and they put them in their sailing ships and haul them to where they were needed, this particular South America. When they got them to America, the miller would take and buy the stones off of the man who was in charge of the stones on the ship, or he could buy them through the Sears and Roebuck catalog at the time. When he got them here to the mill, like I said, there was 14 pieces to each stone, so you couldn't just slap a stone into place and it's ready to go. The miller had to build the stones, and when he built the stones, he would take a mixture of horsehide glue and plaster of Paris and glue each one of the 14 pieces that he had to chip together. Then you'd have a blacksmith come in, and the blacksmith would make the steel band for each one of the 4 stones. By making that steel band, he'd measure the circumference of the steel band, or the stone, and make the steel band. And when he would make the steel band, he'd leave it a little small for the stone. So when he got ready to put it onto the stone, he would heat the steel band up, it would expand, he'd slip it over the stone, and when it cooled, it would shrink and have a tight fit around that stone. He'd also make the little round gimbal pins that are on either side of the stones, the bales, those arch things that go up to the screw that you see sticking through the crane. He'd make the screw, he'd make the wrench on top of the screw, and the carpenter would make that crane. That was used to pick up that 1,200-pound runner stone in the air and move it around from the position it's in to over top of the bed stone here, flipping it and set it down onto the bed stone, or like I said, vice versa, into the position it's in. The reason why they'd have it in an open position is so that they could dress the stones. And when I say dress the stones, they would chip a design in the stones which would help grind the grain faster and finer. If you notice, there's some grooves in this one here. This stone needs to be redressed, but you can see the channels that were chipped into that stone. That was used to grind the grain faster and finer as it worked its way to the outside of the stones. Now, for grinding different grains, you would have a different type of dressing on your stone. This was set up for grinding buckwheat flour. And if you notice on this small stone here, there's grooves that are real close together. That's the way this set of stones is chipped on the inside here of this wooden housing. And that's set up for grinding cornmeal out of corn. And it needed a harder surface or more of a rough surface to grind up against to get the grain ground finer. The way our stones work on the inside of this wooden housing, you can see this little set of stones here. These stones date to the Bible times in Egypt. And the way they would work is one person would put the corn into the stone like so, while another person would take and turn the stone. If you notice, the top stone did the work, it did the turning. It's got it, the proper name for it is a runner stone, and as you can see, it did its work by running around in circles, so it got its name called the runner stone. The bottom stone, or the bed stone is its proper name, never moved, stayed in one spot, so it got its name. It's called the bed stone, so to speak. It never got out of bed. And our stones work the same way on the inside of those wooden housing there. There's a steel shaft that sticks up through the center of this bed stone right here. This key right here sits on top of that steel shaft and turns as the water power is turned on. That key sits in this keyway here and turns that big 1,200-pound runner stone around. And as the grain falls into the stones over here, it falls from this thing right here, which is called a shoe. This here is a damsel. The damsel turns to the top stone and bounces against the shoe and helps the corn flow more freely into the stones. This here is called a horse beam. The horse beam, you can adjust the angle of the shoe, and that also adjusts how fast the grain travels into the stone at a given time. As that stone turns, the grain pulls to the outside as centrifugal force, and it gets ground finer and finer as it pulls its way to the outside. Then it works its way around this wooden housing, around the stones, and comes out the bottom there as fresh, fine cornmeal down at the bottom. Now, before you put your grain into the stones, it would be ran through this machine over here. That machine is called a fanning mill. The fanning mill would clean your corn. Any junk that might be in your corn, like any sticks, stones, pieces of cob, anything like that, would all be channeled off as your grain traveled through a series of screens in the machine. They'd clean that corn, and any of that stuff would be channeled off and come into that bag there. Then the corn would come down into a fan that's on the bottom of the machine, and that fan would blow any dust or dirt that might have been on the corn off, out the red tube on the front of the machine, outside, and then the clean corn would fall into the box there at the bottom. And the box would bring it up into this hopper, and then it would be, through its process, to be ground in the stones. When I turn the water on, I'll open this wheel here. It'll open a gate in the basement that'll let water from our pond travel through the mill and then down the stream. As it travels through the mill, it'll come through our head gate into the flume. The flume is like a big steel pipe that lays on an angle going down 14 foot. And at the top end of the flume, its diameter is about as big around as one of these stones. As it travels down 14 foot, it funnels down into a smaller opening at the bottom. It's about a 2-foot opening at the bottom. And after that 2-foot opening that it goes through, that's where our gate is at. And once the water travels through that gate, it hits the turbine. And for anybody who might not know what a turbine is, our turbine is like a big water wheel, or a big fan rather, laying on its side in a steel housing underneath the water. And when that water hits that fan, or what's called a turbine, it turns that turbine. The steel shaft right here is hooked to the center of that turbine, down in the basement, and it runs up 4 floors to the top of the mill. And it's hooked up to the stones, the fanning mill, a couple machines upstairs. There's also a horizontal shaft that runs across the mill that's hooked up to the cider press. Also, there's a couple machines down in the water power machine shop that it's hooked up to also. But once it got its motion, all that weight would get quite a torque running, and it generates about 140 horsepower. Turn on the water power and show you how that runs. Box on the shaft here. Each one of the floors in the mill had one of these wooden boxes. On this floor is in a higher position because you had the stones and stuff, so people couldn't really get at it. But the reason why they had these boxes were a couple different reasons. You could visually see that the shaft was turning, because if you were working here in the mill and you got used to all this noise, you wouldn't really realize sometimes that this might be turning. You might be working along. If you see that, you visually see, okay, there's a square box turning. You can see that better than you can something round. Another thing was on the other floors was down here in a lower position. So if you happen to be working and you back into this square box, which was free of the pulley, rather than the pulley, and get your clothes caught into the pulley. I like to joke around here that that was one of the things that OSHA first put into effect back in the 1800s. You notice it's running on a slip pulley right now, and as I pull it over, it gets down to the drive shaft. Do this working and run through the green stuff. Back and forth. I did the thing that separates along the floor. The top, things like that. Hitting against each other, and the grain traveling into the stone and coming out the bottom as cornmeal. It starts off looking like that, but you can move fresh and fine cornmeal.
If you're in the mood to have some good cornmeal muffins, you need to stop out here and see O.J. Sabin here at Historic Bowens Mills for his fresh ground cornmeal. One of the features here at Historic Bowens Mills is the free hay rides, and here comes a hayride group now on the wagon.